Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic:
Redditors who have worked around death, burial. What's your best ghost story? I used to be a driver for a funeral home corporation. Drive the hearse and pick up the bodies. Never had anything creepy happen, a few funny things, a few traumatic things. In general it was a chill job. However, I did get incredibly uncomfortable one night picking up a man who died at home. He still had the defibrillator leads on his chest and his eyes were closed. Which is unusual because the eyes are always open. He just looked like he was asleep or unconscious. Not rigid or pale or anything. I just had this sinking feeling for about half an hour in traffic that he was going to suddenly gasp and wake up in the body bag. Then it hit me. That would be the coolest thing ever. I'd take him home and he'd be back with his family. So I just kind of drove slowly and turned up some music and sang along and talked to him. When I got him to the funeral home, I left him out of the cooler for about an hour while I did paperwork and played on my phone. When I got another call, I checked on him and his limbs had started to stiffen. I was kind of bummed. I put him in the cooler and went on my next call. You're such a pure soul. I waited up. I watched to see if you would rise and speak to me to tell me there was some mistake. I waited up. You didn't wake. Man, I hope someone like you pick up someone like me when I die. Honestly, the only creepy thing that happened when I worked in the morgue is that one of the staff killed himself in there, and I just can't imagine wanting to die in this cold, grey place surrounded by corpses. Shrug. When in Rome, I suppose. But life and death, day in, day out, alas, leaves little room for doubt. He looked around and felt no fear, and whispered softly, "Since I'm here." Even creepier if he pre-tagged his toe and put himself away in the freezer. Name: John Smith. Cause of death: Malay's time of death, 10 or so minutes from now. Quote: Corpses move when you cremate. People who don't know this get spooked a lot. In mortuary school I had a dream about embalming my dad, but he was still alive. My classmates tried to tell me it was just tissue gas and he wasn't actually alive and get my shit together. Then when I cut him open he gasped a faint, "Heal LLLP me." So then the next day I had to go to lab. My second case ever. And I told my classmates about the dream. We had a chuckle about it and started to work on our body. Old lady had pretty severe arthritis, so when I was breaking the rigor she literally clutched my hand. It's the only time I ever got some serious heebie-fucking-jeebies. I had to step away from her and collect myself for a minute. Lol. I grew up with a friend from a family that owned a funeral parlor, embalming place that resembled the situation in the movie, My Girl, where the business was in the basement and downstairs and they lived on the top 2 floors. Big, rambling Victorian house. I don't have any ghost stories or anything, but any time I went to a slumber party etc. As a kid there I was a little freaked out just knowing there might be a body downstairs. When my father worked at a mortuary, there was one incident where the muscles contracted so that the head turned and looked at him through the little window. The only time he ever felt spooked working there. Corpse be like, hot in here eh? Corpses move when you cremate. So like bacon in a frying pan? Got it. Thanks. A little. We got a lot of muscle. Muscle contract when you burn it. Pretty much. Sometimes they sit up. During my apprenticeship, I worked at a funeral home said to be haunted by an old funeral director assistant who had a heart attack in the building and died. All he ever did was mess with the chapel lights, and if you called him out something like, "John, the family is coming. Please don't," they would return to normal. Not really sure if I believe it was really haunted, but saying something always fixed the issue, so I kept doing it my entire time there. Kinda nice to have a poltergeist you can talk to. The poltergeist at my family home is also very friendly and just wants attention from time to time. That's what I figured with what happened. It used to be his job to set up the chapel, and he probably felt like he was helping in turning the lights on. I love stories of people talking to ghosts. My childhood home was haunted, and the door to my grandparents' living room would crack open very slightly on its own. My granddad would always say something like, "Come on in and sit down, mate," and the door would open further and my grandma would yell at him. "This is hilarious. Your grandpa should have invited the ghost for beer and poured it one." The ghost at my store is named John. He only fucks with me on evening shifts. He died about a year and a half after I started working there. He was like a odd job guy, would come and change the garbage and top up the squeegee buckets. Him and I did not like each other. He was a thief and my boss is too soft-hearted to do anything. But I would call him out. But yeah, it's mostly stuff falling off shelves and I just tell him to fuck off. OMFG. I used to work at a haunted grocery store and we have like 5 that I can actually differentiate between. Sometimes I think they just want attention, so they do dumb shit like knocking bags of bagels off the shelf or making the automatic doors open and close repeatedly. If you told them, "Guys, I don't have time for games today," they would stop screwing with you. If they liked you, I used to tell them to go scare the shoplifters later at night. Every so often you would get someone walking in a hurry looking freaked out. Not a funeral home, but I worked at one of the last booth homes for pregnant girls in the early 2000s. Lots of dead babies and some dead moms in the history of that campus. We had any number of creepy things happen, to the point that I brought it up in a staff meeting and the social workers just said, "Oh, must be time to have the building blessed again." But what stuck with me was the baby swing. I came into the living room and found it swinging by itself hours after all the teenagers were in bed. Now, this was an ancient mechanical, wind-up, swing. You had to turn a crank to start it. There was no electricity involved. There was no way it just started on its own. And there it was, swinging full force. I was completely terrified, but I just said, "If you want to swing, I will be happy to wind up the swing for you." But when you do it on your own, it frightens people. Every night for the rest of the year or so I worked there, I wound that swing up and let it go. I told other staff members and I believe they did the same. I like to think it was a sweet baby ghost who just wanted attention, and we gave it attention. Later they closed the program for parenting teens and made the whole place a homeless shelter. Now I am sitting here worrying about my ghost baby. Is it lonely? I hope not.